Is it the truth? Or is it a fact? Wait, are truth and fact different? Or is it just an opinion? Or maybe it's part truth, part fact, part opinion, and all propaganda. How in the world would you know?
Welcome to Leading Leaders Podcast. 5-minute videos, 5 days a week.
I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. I think we find ourselves in a world, not only politically speaking, but academically speaking, where there's a whole lot of data. And, you know, the old phrase is someone who studies statistics usually finds themselves to be an expert in the understanding that all statistics are made to prove a point. And for most of them, the point is that statistics lie. And let that sink in for a minute, because what we're really talking about is the fact that you can count just about anything. Now, there's old measurement tools and measurement ideologies that say if you don't measure it, you can't manage it, which really means something like your checkbook or your inventory or the data that you manage behind your customers. Who are they? Where are they from? What did they buy last time? What do you think they'll buy next time? How much have they spent with you? What's the lifetime value? Those are data points or statistics that you might gather. You might gather the number of people who got married, or the mortality tables like the insurance companies use. How many people die from this and how many people die from that, and then what causes the death, and what age is it most common to die, and how is that related to genes or geography or income levels or education levels. And all of that data swirling around in a big pool creates information, data, facts that are measurable, that we can look back on and say, well, here's what we know about what did happen. And from that, a lot of times we'll extrapolate, well, this is what the pattern has shown, and therefore we would anticipate that the future pattern will look very similar to that. And so from that data, which we would call facts, we can now come up with what we have as a projection or a prediction. And sometimes people will say those also are facts, but they're not. They're predictions. And the sad part too is that what we would call facts from the data points collected, statistics will tell you, generally statistics are based on. That sentence all by itself is a world of trouble. But generally statistics are based on a random sample, meaning we don't actually have all the data from all, say, 100,000 people in the pool of people that we're trying to measure, but we've got a random sample of a certain percentage of those 100,000. And what we're going to do is superimpose the reality of those 10%. So maybe 10,000 people, or maybe it's a 1% sample. It's 1,000 people out of 100,000. And so we're going to take what happened to those 1,000 people and say, well, that's going to be what's going to happen to everybody. You see how what we might call data and facts can now be a little bit up for interpretation? Because if you got 100,000 people and you only count 1,000 of them, or measure 1,000 of them, or ask the question of 1,000 of them, or survey 1,000 of them, you have 99,000 people who might have a different experience, whereby your data, your facts, are going to change. Now see, here's where it gets really, really tricky. That data that you gather from the 1,000 or the 99,000, filtered through the person who collected the data, who might have a human inclination to read a meaning into, or a cause into, or their own, you ready for this? Their own agenda into the meaning of the data before they tell you what it is. People who might say, well, the reason that teenagers, for an example, have higher insurance rates is because teenagers drive like maniacs. Well, technically, the medical reason that they have higher insurance rates is because they have no prefrontal cortex, which means they don't have the ability to comprehend long-term or short-term consequences of their behavior, which is why they make great soldiers. But after they turn 25, they start to grow that prefrontal cortex in a different way, and their comprehension of consequences is entirely different. They drive differently, they relate differently, they handle money differently, they get educated differently, they fight differently on a battlefield, they become more strategic and less tactical. It's a medical reality. But the data can be used to say whatever you want the data to say. So is it a fact? Is it a truth? Is it an opinion? Is it all of it mixed together with an agenda, and now that makes it propaganda? Because you can take facts. You can take facts that are true and mix in your opinion and create propaganda. You can take facts that have truth behind them and mix in your own agenda and your own opinion to create propaganda that will cause other people to act in a certain way so that the facts and the data you collect later represent the idea you had in mind to begin with. True story. But see, I'm a believer, and I know not everyone is. There are some who will use a phrase like, whatever is true to you, that's what's true. I'm a firm believer in absolute truth. I believe there are things that are definitively true. Here's one of those things that's definitively true. And I'm going to compare a truth and a fact to close this message. It's definitively true that based on the Earth's rotation, the Earth always rises over the United States, starting first in the east. It comes up in the east, makes its way across the United States, east to west, and it sets in the west. That's why the sun rises in Florida and the sunsets in California are absolutely gorgeous, spectacular, wonderful. Sea level, you can see the water reflecting the sun as it comes up or goes down, depending on which side you're on. And that beautiful appearance is based on the physics, the absolute truth that the sun always comes up on the east side of the United States and always goes down on the west side of the United States. And so it is all the way around the globe because that's the way it rotates. And that's a truth that cannot be undone. In fact, when it is undone, our whole universe is a mess. But here's a fact that sits next to that truth that can be manipulated by agenda. When the sun comes up, when it begins to rise in the east and pop up out of the water and begins to reflect, and you see that big orange ball, and suddenly you think, the sun is up, it must be hot. Well, if you're in Texas, there's a good chance that's true. If you're in Florida, there's a good chance that's true. If you're in Honduras, there's a good chance that's true because you're so far south. But just because you see the sunrise in Manhattan, you better check your calendar to determine if it's going to be hot, because there are certain times of the year that the sun coming up doesn't even melt the ice on your windows, much less get hot. It's true. The sun is there, it's up, and it's rising in the east, and that's a truth you can't do anything to change. But the fact that it's hot, well, not only is that seasonal, it's very subjective. Maybe I like 95 degrees, and to me that's not hot, it's pleasant. Maybe you like 105 degrees, and while I'm melting like a snowman, you're loving the sun. That may be a fact that it's 100 degrees or 95 degrees or 105 degrees. It's a fact. It's measurable. But the opinion behind whether or not that's hot, now that's subjective. And now we have an agenda and a propaganda because we have opinion mixed in with our truth and our facts. You follow me so far? Yeah, this same principle applies to theory of religions, theory of politics, theory of relationships, even some sciences get twisted somewhere between absolute truths, facts that are measurable, and the opinion of the person measuring the facts or retelling them. My challenge to you as leaders is to understand the difference, to do your homework, and be able to decipher between the facts, which are manipulatable, the opinions, which really are like everyone else's socks. Everybody has some and they all stink. And the agendas that are driven to propagandize truth and facts together. As a leader, if you can't tell the difference, you can be manipulated. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.